Brics stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, starting off as a designation by analysts, but which then became a formal club. Since last year, Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates also joined the group, so-called Big Brics or Brics Plus.
There's a silent shift happening in the world's power balance, and most people aren't paying attention. While the headlines focus on stock markets and Fed decisions, something far more strategic is unfolding. The BRICS alliance is reshaping global influence. What started as an economic forecast is now a political force that has the global north on edge. The rise of BRICS. 16 years after its official launch, BRICS is no longer just a catchy acronym. Originally coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in 2001 to describe Brazil, Russia, India, and China as the future engines of global growth, the bloc has evolved into a powerful coalition of emerging economies. South Africa joined in 2010, completing the first phase of expansion. Fast forward to 2024 and 2025, the group has grown to include Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, and Indonesia. Partner countries like Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Thailand, Uganda, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam also joined the Rio Summit in 2025, marking a dramatic increase in its global reach. This growth is not just symbolic. BRICS now accounts for nearly 50% of global GDP based on purchasing power parity and represents more than half the world's population. Add to that the fact that many members, China, India, Brazil, are among the fastest growing economies, and you start to see why the global north, particularly Washington, is paying close attention. A threat to the dollar. One of the most controversial moves by BRICS has been its push toward de-dollarization. The bloc has long debated how to reduce its dependence on the US dollar in international trade, a system that heavily favors the United States. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has been one of the loudest voices calling for change. Speaking at the BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro in July 2025, he said, "The world needs to find a way that our trade relations do not have to pass through the US dollar." The idea isn't to immediately replace the dollar with a single BRICS currency. Lula has made that clear. Instead, the focus is on using local currencies for trade and possibly creating a new payment instrument. For countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which already trade oil outside the dollar to some extent, this aligns perfectly with their long-term strategies. But such moves have drawn the ire of US President Donald Trump, who warned of 100% tariffs on BRICS members if they continued what he called anti-American policies. By July 2025, Trump doubled down, threatening an additional 10% tariff against nations pursuing de-dollarization. US pressure, the new front line. Washington's response to the BRICS agenda hasn't been just words. India, Brazil, and South Africa are now dealing with intense US pressure. India is being targeted over its imports of 1.7 million barrels per day of Russian crude. What started as a mild warning has evolved into the threat of secondary sanctions, not necessarily as punishment, but as leverage. Market analysts believe Trump's administration is using this to force India to open its markets to US agricultural goods or to redirect its energy needs toward American LNG. This has put the Reserve Bank of India in a tricky spot, especially as the rupee trades defensively near the 88.00 USD per INR level. Brazil's situation is even more dramatic. The US slapped the country with 50% tariffs, citing human rights concerns linked to former President Jair Bolsonaro, who was recently placed under house arrest. This has created a political storm ahead of President Lula's address to the nation. Despite this, the Brazilian real has remained resilient, buoyed by near 15% implied yields that attract global investors hungry for returns. South Africa faces 30% US tariffs, yet the rand is holding strong thanks to the South African Reserve Bank's bold decision to lower its inflation target to 3%. This policy move impressed investors and drew in bond market inflows, showing that strategic decisions can offset external pressure, at least for now. A summit that signaled change. The 17th Brics Summit, held in Rio de Janeiro on July 6 to 7, 2025, reinforced the bloc's commitment to challenging the existing world order. The leaders signed a declaration titled Strengthening Global South Cooperation for More Inclusive and Sustainable Governance, which outlined 126 commitments across governance, finance, health, artificial intelligence, climate change, peace, and cultural cooperation. Key takeaways included the condemnation of unilateral tariffs, the call for UN Security Council reform, and a strong stance against wars in Iran, Gaza, and Lebanon. The bloc unanimously criticized Israeli and US military strikes inside Iran and voiced support for peace efforts in Syria and Sudan. Even without naming the United States directly, the message was clear. Brics is positioning itself as a counterbalance to Western dominance. Expert insights. Beyond the headlines. According to David Manya, director of the University of Johannesburg Confucius Institute, the summit underscored Brics' role as a collective voice for the global South. Manya highlighted that the group is not only pushing for economic reforms, but also challenging the weakening of international law and the rise in military spending in the global North. Ana Sajoro Garcia from the Brics Policy Center emphasized that finance ministers released 3 major declarations, including a demand for reform of IMF quotas and representation. She noted the push for discussions on taxation under UN frameworks, seen as more democratic than the OECD. While there was no explicit mention of taxing the ultra-rich, the inclusion of climate finance in the summit's agenda showed Brics' commitment to sustainable development. Indonesia's new role in the bloc was explained by Bima Yudhistira Adinegara, who pointed out that Jakarta joined Brics to strengthen ties with China, boost trade, and advance climate diplomacy. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto Jojo Hadikusumo even pledged to achieve 100% renewable energy within the next decade, using Brics as a platform to combine development with energy transition. Expanding influence, expanding tensions. The inclusion of Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Indonesia has expanded Brics' footprint across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. This growth boosts its legitimacy, but also increases its internal complexity. The group has yet to formalize membership criteria, but its willingness to accept diverse economies signals a clear intent to strengthen its voice on the global stage. Partner country status, introduced in 2024, allows nations to engage without full membership obligations. Countries like Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, and Uzbekistan benefit from participation while aligning gradually with the bloc's priorities, yet their influence on decision-making remains limited. Vietnam joined as a strategic partner, Algeria became part of the new development bank, and Colombia has begun its accession process, highlighting the growing appeal of the BRICS framework. Technology and digital sovereignty. One of the most forward-looking initiatives to emerge from the summit was the proposal for a new subsea fiber-optic network connecting Brics nations. Backed by President Lula, this 35,000-kilometer network aims to bypass US-centric routing systems, reducing costs and increasing data security. Brazil's strategic location makes it a key hub for this digital infrastructure, which could transform connectivity across the global South. The dollar's delicate position. While Brics makes bold moves, the US dollar remains the dominant global currency. However, cracks are starting to show. Markets have priced in about 60 basis points of Fed rate cuts by the end of 2025, and commentary from Fed officials like Mary Daly, Lisa Cook, and Susan Collins could sway sentiment further. A softer ISM services report or weaker employment data could re-energize dollar bears, adding another layer of uncertainty. Can BRICS hold together? Critics in Washington argue that BRICS diversity is its weakness. Different political systems, economic priorities, and internal rivalries make consensus difficult. But as Monyi pointed out, while these tensions exist, they haven't stopped the group from advancing its goals. The new development bank continues to fund infrastructure and sustainability projects, showing that cooperation remains functional even amid political differences. The real test lies ahead. The US-China tariff review on August 12th could mark a turning point. If Washington escalates, this may turn from isolated disputes into a coordinated campaign to undermine BRICS. How the bloc reacts will determine whether it can transform into a lasting force or remain a fragile coalition. What happens next? The world is entering a phase where power is no longer concentrated in one corner. The global south is rising, demanding a say in how the rules are written. For the global north, particularly the United States, this shift is uncomfortable, and it's responding with tariffs, sanctions, and political pressure. But can economic muscle and shared ambition overcome the differences within BRICS? Will the push for de-dollarization and digital independence succeed against decades of entrenched systems? These are the questions that will define the next chapter of global power. The BRICS story is far from over, and its impact will ripple through markets, politics, and diplomacy for years to come. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Will this union redefine the world order, or will it crack under pressure? And if you want more insights into the forces shaping our world, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more.